Let's look at this idea of footprinting. And footprinting is obtaining information about a company's presence on mainly on the internet, but there's some other things involved as well. And it's off the screen here, but I'm gonna start a program called Sam Spade. And this tool hasn't been updated in quite some time, which is it may be okay. Maybe there's nothing else to do with it. And there's some things that don't work nearly as well as they used to. And I'm not sure that if that's because we don't have it configured properly, or I do think that it's getting somewhat harder to obtain information when you're doing your footprinting, and that's a good thing. I'll give you instructions on how to download this. You probably should go into options here and put in a name server, and you can always use this one. This is the one at Maysville College, and I'm just going to click OK. Now up here in the corner you've got a window, and let me show you what it looks like when things work. I actually have registered my name as a domain, and I'm paying a company for a website, and I haven't got around to doing anything with it yet. But you could put in what you see there and press. If you press enter, it's going to do a who is. That's what we want to do. You can see those various commands down the side here. This box here lets you pick out a particular who is server. I often start out on Magic, and sometimes I change it after that. So let's just leave it on Magic right now. Click on who is and see if we find something out here. So this is what Sam Spade found out on my behalf here, and it did a who is. Probably at that address right there, which is, I don't recognize it. But anyway, here's the information it finds out. Domain, this is my domain name, of course, and this is when I created it. And I guess I should make a little mental note there that it runs out in August. It's probably like on a yearly renewal schedule here, just kind of looking at it. Here are the two name servers, and 1&1 is the company that I registered with and pay for a website that, of course, I haven't put anything on yet. And those are the two name server IP numbers. But look here what you get under registrant first name. There's my name, there's my mailing address, and there's my phone number. It's my cell phone, actually. And I'm also listed as the administrator. And this is interesting from the standpoint of now I have a name. If this was a regular real company, I would have a name that I could possibly use in a social engineering attack. And I'm sure you've seen things like this in the movies or on TV, where the bad guys take a little bit of information and use that to obtain more information or to gain access to something they shouldn't have access to. So if you can throw a few names around, oftentimes you can gain access to things you shouldn't have access to. This idea of the IP block, well, let's try dig first. I'm going to dig on my name here. And apparently that's all I'm going to find out. And I think this is something we knew. Well, this is actually the web server address, I believe. So if we wanted to If we wanted to mount an attack, we'd probably use this address. Let's see how IP block. IP block's one of those things that used to work pretty well and doesn't seem to work as well as it used to. It didn't return the owner of that block. Sometimes you can get a little more information if you actually change your whois. ARIN is the American Regional Internet Registry. So try it again. I'm not pretty sure we're not going to find anything there. You can try some of these other commands if you want to. This will do a trace route to this server, which is kind of interesting sometimes. Now these are all IP numbers. Sometimes you actually get names there. Here you go. It's filling in some names. Kind of gives you some idea of what's between your computer and the computer that you're interested in. And maybe you know something about, you might know something about these router names and could get close to a physical location for this guy. You notice when I clicked on this, it filled in the number up here. And I'm going to try IP block again. Still don't get anything there. So let's try something else here. This is my web server here at the college. I'm going to switch this back to Magic. Let's go with the whois on it. Can't. This used to work a lot better than it does now. So there are other whois servers on the internet. Let's see if we can. I'm going to open up a web page here. Sometimes you can find more information out. Here, sometimes you can't. I think it's one of those situations where we found out a lot more if we directly went to ARIN, which is the American Registry for Internet Numbers. Okay. So you'll see this is the IP block I couldn't get to work in Sam Spade. And this is the block that's been allocated to KCTCS, and there you go there. And if you look down through here, you'll find addresses, you'll find a number of contacts here. This is Charles Moniker, who's a really nice guy. But see, we got a name now, and we got some phone numbers. And if you look on down here, here's another name we've got. Another name. This person is actually at the Governor's Office or the Commonwealth Office of Technology. Another name. So if we were going to try a social engineering attack, now we've got a number of names as well as a block of IPs if we want to do some scanning, and we'll look at that later. There's another tool that does some interesting things. It's www.mxtoolbox.com, and the one that's really interesting is SuperTool, .aspx. So apparently the super tool is in beta, and so far I haven't found a link to it across the menu here on this page. But if you try some things, you often get here, so I just wrote it down. Let me give you an example of something interesting here. I'm going to put in my web server 46 and do a lookup. Now, you don't necessarily, maybe you don't think you're getting as much information here as you did before, but there's a couple of interesting things here. You can do a port scan. If you click on port scan, and if this is rotating and that's rotating, it's working. So what happens here is one of the servers at MX Toolbox actually did a port scan of certain selected ports on my web server, and we're going to do port scanning later from our machines. And from our machines we have obviously a lot more control over what we scan and the rate we scan, etc. But the advantage here is the scans are not coming from our computer. So that was interesting. On my web server, FTP is open. It has a mail server running, a web server, and let me think here. Apparently I don't have HTTPS on, but I have remote desktop turned on. So that actually tells me a lot as an attacker. If I can, I fed in an IP address and I found out that it's a web server, because there's an amazing amount of attacks that go through the web interface, and the reason that web server attacks are so prevalent is you can't hide a web server. You can't put it behind a firewall. You can put it behind a firewall, and you should, but the firewall is only going to be blocking requests for other ports and services. You still have to let the web traffic through. So there's a lot of attacks against web servers, particularly nowadays that a lot of web servers are actually connected to a database. So you get a lot of these things called SQL injection attacks, which I'll give you some examples of. So this is kind of interesting. If you look around here on this website, it starts out with a MX tool, those mailbox tools, which is mainly what it's about. But in the process of doing some of this stuff, you actually wind up looking at the tool I actually used, which was the super tool, I think is what they call it. Yeah. So play around with this. Play around with Sam Spade. You can always go actually do a who is in and I've already lost the window with the who is in it. And pretty much any one of your internet registries has a who is associated with it. And let's see what happens if we type who is. So here's whois.net. Let's see what we can do here. I'm going to try a different domain. Let's try jcpenney.com. Okay, we got some registrant information here. The registrar name is Corporate Domains Incorporated, so it looks like JCPenney's kind of farmed some of this out. Um, administrative contact. Notice there's no person's name given here, which is good. So JCPenney's doing a much better job of minimizing the amount of information out there than I am with my domain. So there's 3 tools you can play around with to see what sort of information you can determine. And what we're mainly interested here is IP numbers, IP ranges that are used by a company, public IP numbers, contact information, phone numbers, and things of this nature. We're just trying to get some idea of any sort of background information that we can get on a particular target, which is usually a target company. We're thinking like attackers now. And from the other standpoint, if you're a good guy, if you're working for a company, you need to try to figure out how to minimize your the information that you have out there. And you also need to be trying to train your users so that maybe they can detect and not fall victim to a social engineering attack where the bad guys are dropping names and trying to talk their way into access that they shouldn't have. So this is footprinting, and this is the first step in oftentimes the first step in an attack.